Folks, welcome to the Black Men Summit here on the Culture on the Black Star Network, where we're talking about redefining and celebrating Black manhood. I'm your special guest. When I say special guest, I'm your host, Faraji Muhammad. Thank you so much for tuning in. Folks, we are going to have this is day 3 of our fantastic summit. Over the past 2 days, we've been talking to Black men from across the country to give us some insight and analysis and some hope and solutions as well about some of the areas that Black men are struggling in right now. And today will be no different from that. We are going to continue this conversation. We wanted to have a discussion about where we are with the state of education of Black America. And so we wanted to do our part to bring some dynamic voices to this discussion, Black men who are leading the way in making sure that other brothers and sisters and our communities and our families are all gaining from this situation and this system of education. So without further ado, we want to welcome our very special guest here today. We are joined by Dr. Steve Perry, who serves as the educator. He's an author and he's founder of Capital Prep Schools. My brother, is always good to see him here on the Black Star Network. Brother Steve, thank you so much, sir, for your time this afternoon.
Thank you so much. I'm truly honored to be part of this conversation.
Absolutely. Also joining us is Anthony Pena, who is an educator and activist. He has been working with young people and Black boys in particular in underserved communities for the past almost a decade now that he's been doing that incredible work. Brother Anthony, thank you so much for joining us as well.
Thank you, Brother Faraj. It's good to be here.
Absolutely. And then in a few moments, we should be joined by, if I'm not mistaken, Brother David Miller. He's going to be coming and joining us, and we're going to be checking in with him as he serves as an educator and author and founder of the Dare to Be King curriculum. Dr. Perry, let's start with you, big brother. When we talk about this issue of Black men in education, there are a lot of ways we can handle this conversation. So I'm going to start here. When do you think that it happened when we started to see a decline, and in some cases, a removal of Black men from the school system? Some people would go as far as to say that it was during that landmark decision of Brown versus the Board of Education that once schools started to become more integrated, that we started to see something change within the culture of education of Black children, but more importantly, we started to see something different in the administration of education from for Black teachers. What's your take on that, big brother?
Again, thank you so much for having the conversation because it's so important. But it's a bigger conversation than even the Brown versus Board of Education. Black men were never intended to be full participants in what we refer to as formal education. In fact, it was never supposed to be something that we were supposed to have had access to. From the time of slavery, the expectation was that if you taught the men in the community to read, those men would rise up and recognize that they, in fact, were human. And so the formation of what we refer to as public education was designed in many ways to indoctrinate people of color. The first public school that's on record was not 1635 classical in Boston, but 1634 in school in the Maryland area that was founded by white settlers to indoctrinate Native people. So if you fast forward all the way up through Brown versus Board of Education and up through 1968 in New York, where they had the strike, there have been consistent efforts to limit access to education, both from a student perspective and from a professional perspective. Continue all the way up through now. Those of us like myself who seek to start our own schools are constantly met with the aggression of the white establishment, whose single goal is to make sure that we don't get ourselves in a position to do well in school or to run our own schools within which we can do well. I'll take it one step further. If you imagine this, that in 2021, only 5% of all Black students who took the ACT passed all 4 sections and would otherwise be deemed as college ready. That means that the intentions of the system to make sure that Black people do not succeed in it have been met.
Wow. I want to get your take on that, Brother Anthony, kind of following what Dr. Perry is putting out there. Then I'm going to share something in that, because I think, Dr. Perry, you definitely are touching something. Brother Anthony, what's your take on it, bro?
And Dr. Perry's a pastor right here. He hit it right in the mark. We're not meant to be in the classroom. That's why we saw Black men, Black students placed special education on purpose, right, on track to get them back because of the behaviors, quote unquote, where they're not culturally competent in their areas, or they feel like the institution of learning feels like Black students, and males in particular, are different, and therefore we got to treat them differently. And so there's never been an aspiration. For me personally, my first Black male teacher was in college when I went to Georgetown University. So for me, I didn't know that was a possibility to be education, because all I saw were female teachers, or Black female teachers in particular, or white males. So for me, it was never an aspiration until somebody else sat me down and was able to mentor me, and then I saw myself coming to education. So we see the battle here continuously. We look at suspension data, we look at learning disabilities. It's targeted against Black male students continuously, and we see that in the spectrum a lot. And so it's a correlation between they don't want us in the classroom, and they definitely don't want us to teach true education. The reason why people do not like education, quote unquote, is because they don't feel seen or heard in the classroom. So when there's a differing opinion on a viewpoint, they told that young man to be quiet, or there's some things that we might think differently and it's shunned upon. So a lot of times we become disvalued from the system because we feel like nobody understands what we believe in, and therefore we're almost criticized for believing something differently than what as Ruby Payne talks about, middle class norms. Learning is really based on and rooted in middle class norms, particularly white education. And if you remember, education foundation of this country was founded on white male landowners, and so only if you're a white male privileged you went to school. So there's never been for other people that said white males, and in particular definitely not Black students, because they're in slavery, we're not allowed to read or write. So therefore this has been long-standing culture in America where Black men do not belong in education because it was designed for white men.
And I want to go back to the point that you made, Brother Steve, about this, because it sounds like we need to really have a different conversation. I'm saying we as Black folks, we as Black America need to have a different conversation about the importance of education. I was reading this piece with this brother named Sharif El-Mekki, who serves as the CEO of the Center for Black Educator Development, which is a prominent teacher pipeline that pushes for educational diversity in public schools. He was having this conversation, and he said this, and Lisa, let's put up quote number 3 on the screen, please. This is what he said. He said, there's this naive notion that school is a safe space for Black youth, and it's not. He said, when we talk to Black educators, it's not only that they often experience racism from their colleagues and supervisors as professionals, but they also remember when they experienced something similar as a child. But the effect is that now they're trying to protect children and work against policies and mindsets that are racist. So that's the trifecta. I'm experiencing this as a professional. I remember that as a child. And now I'm also having a classroom full of students, and I want to push back against that. Would you agree with that, Brother Steve? That it's that trifecta?
Yeah. Brother El-Mekki is a solid cat. And let's just take it even one step further. There are very specific reasons as to why there are very few Black men teaching. And it's by design. Like hires like. What that means is if the overwhelming majority of those people who teach are white and female, then what they think is worthy of continuing the work that they're doing is someone who they think is someone who's like them, who makes them feel comfortable in themselves. And so like hires like. Why is that important? It's important because the largest employer in virtually every municipality, largest public employer in virtually every municipality is their public school system. So their public school system is employing typically white women, and they're not about to give up access to great jobs, to African American men in particular, African Americans in general. And as a result, in most communities nationwide, African Americans make up less than 5% of the teaching population, and Black men make up about 20% of that. So this is not by accident. The teachers' unions, which are overwhelmingly white and female, the many people who are the Democrats who support them, who keep these policies in place, that in most cases make it harder for Black men to be teachers because we struggled in the classroom, not because we struggled, but they struggled with us. Then the tests they give us to become certified are consistent with if you had stayed in class. And then they create a like issue, which is even if you become certified, you do all the things you need to, you're liable to end up in front of a panel of white women who are going to say, I just don't see as a culture fit.
Wow.
It's a very clear process that leads to this ultimate end. It's not by mistake. It's intentional. So when brothers like me say, hey, all right, cool. I want to work at your school. I want to start my own school. I'm good. Just let me start my own school. He's privatizing education. He's taking money away from the public. They will do everything to malign brothers like me who say, no. You don't want us in our schools. You're gonna suspend, expel, and discipline Black boys at a rate higher than any other group. So just give them to me. No, you can't have them because then that means I won't have one of these good jobs. So you can't take them because I need them to keep my job. You can't start your own schools because I needed to keep my job. So you just figure it out.
We got to take a quick pause. I want everybody to marinate on that. And then, Anthony, I want to get your take. We're going to be bringing my other brother, Dr. David Miller, into this. Folks, join us in the conversation. You hearing what we're up against here in terms of the educational space. And I would love to hear from you, crew, as to what do you think we should do and how we should move forward in making sure we get more Black men into the classrooms and into educational leadership roles. Join us in the conversation. We're streaming right now live on YouTube on the Roland Martin's YouTube page. Join the chat, be a Culture Crew member for the day. And of course, stay tuned. We still got a lot more to chat about with Dr. Steve Perry, Anthony Pena, and Dr. David Miller right here on the Culture's Black Men Summit, where we're redefining and celebrating Black manhood right here on the Black Star Network. We'll be right back.
When you talk about Blackness and what happens in Black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it. This is about covering us. Invest in Black-owned media. Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks. We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible. Checks and money orders go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland at RolandSMartin.com.
All right, folks, welcome back to the Culture's Black Men Summit. We're talking about Black men in education, and joining me has been Dr. Steve Perry, who is an educator, author, and founder of the Capital Prep Schools. We thank Dr. Perry for joining us this afternoon. We're also joined by my brother Anthony Pena, who is an educator. He's an administrator. He served in the almost as assistant principal at a number of schools in Baltimore, and he is on his way to getting his doctorate as well as he's moving forward in his journey. And I want to make sure we got my other brother, Dr. David Miller, who is joining us. He's an educator, he's an author as well, and he has founded the Dare to Be King curriculum, which is teaching Black boys how to think higher of themselves. So again, I want to thank my brothers for joining us. Let me start with you, Brother David, because I want to get you into the mix of these things. When we talk about education, and as much as we do talk about, I know all three of y'all have heard the talk. I want to know for real, from all y'all brothers, do you think Black people really care about education in 2023? Or is the role of the teacher just one of a babysitter? I mean, do we have a vested interest? Do we see education the same way that, say, our grandparents see education, or even some of our parents have seen education? Brother Dave, I'm gonna start with that question with you. What's your take, brother?
So unequivocally, I think Black parents and the Black community is vested in figuring out ways to ensure that our children get a world-class education. I think the challenge becomes you bump into systems, and as Dr. Perry and Brother Anthony were talking about, oftentimes parents become overwhelmed with trying to navigate a system that doesn't always demonstrate its love, particularly for Black and brown children. And so a lot of times you do see some apathy at the community level and at the part of parents, because you're bumping into a system, whether you have a child who has special needs or whether you have a child that's being bullied in school. When it comes to parents trying to come up to the school, trying to intervene, you often see a clash. And so it's not that the Black community is not vested in school or vested in ensuring our babies get a great education. The challenge is some people will argue that the system is broken. Others will argue that the system is designed to perpetuate itself and to create a permanent underclass. Whichever way you fall on that continuum, we have to do a better job of disrupting the system. And some of the ways that we can disrupt the system is by creating efforts like Brother Sharif in Philly to recruit, retain, and train more Black male teachers. But then we also need more Black school-based mental health professionals. So it's not just teachers. We need more trained, skilled folk who understand our children from a mental health perspective, from a community perspective in the schools. We need more school nurses, because there doesn't seem to be a shortage of, school police or local police patrolling schools, but those essential adults, those essential professionals that we need in the building to support the work that the teachers are doing is something that we really need to focus on.
And that's a different approach, Brother Anthony, when we're talking about not just getting teachers, but you need a support staff, you need an infrastructure of support for Black boys, and particularly for Black boys and girls. I know personally that as an educator and as one who's have served in that capacity of not just teaching in the classroom, but also serving as a guidance counselor in a lot of ways. And you have experienced great loss, because some of the students that you have mentored, some of the students that you have watched grow up, their lives are taken by the street life. So talk to us about that experience, and more importantly, why and how we can create a structure of care and support for our students.
Absolutely, Faraji. And as Dr. Miller said, young people now are facing more odds than we ever faced before. The reality is we're fighting social media. We're fighting the ideas in the community that are anti-Black at times, but also we're fighting among ourselves. There's a clash between what we need, what we deserve, and our young people are suffering. They're suffering greatly. In the last 3 years, I have lost 37 students that I know personally that I've mentored to gun violence here in Baltimore. And It's to the point that I stopped going to funerals, and just when I get the call at midnight at 12:03 or 1:30 in the morning, I already know what it is. It's not a positive thing. And unfortunately, 8 hours a day out of 168 hours in a week, 40 hours a week at best, maybe 47 hours in some schools, maybe 50. That's not enough time to help our young people out. And our young, and particularly in the last couple of years, the most increased number of suicide has been among Black males. Yeah. And so we have this pandemic of COVID, but we never talk about the pandemic of mental health. Our young boys in particular are in pain, and hurt people. So when we want to criticize young people picking up a gun, we don't talk about what caused the young man to pick up a gun or knife to harm somebody else. There's pain in there a lot of times. And so we have to really look at how, as Dr. Miller said, how can we get school counselors who are not just there to service kids academically, but guide them in the right way. And we have to have the right people, the right that do not put them in situations worse. Go ahead, Surprise.
Yeah. No, I'm sorry, brother. I definitely agree with you. And Dr. Perry, by us creating that infrastructure or putting that type of investment, do we, quote unquote, cripple Black men? Because, I think that we're also, and I'm going to just use the term from traditional feminism, where, we're the patriarchal system that we are all a part of encourages us to stay stoic, to remove any type of emotions, to not feel pain. But now we're trying to turn the tide and shift the culture so where people do care. If Brother Anthony has lost 37 students to gun violence, and each day students got to go to school, life goes on, but there hasn't been a grief process, there hasn't been a processing period. It seems like it's asking a lot for a black male teacher to come into a system and to carry that great burden.
I want to start with the first part of the question I heard you ask. I heard you ask if Black parents still care about education. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Now, there's some wild acting parents who come up and lose their whole damn mind. Yeah. But that's not because they're Black. It's because they're wild. But do they care? Parents who are Black are the ones taking a risk on a school that was opened in a strip mall. Parents are the ones who will take a risk on a brand new school or put their kids on multiple buses and take the risk of actual prison just to get their kid to a good school. The problem is that they have to accept that it's probable that the school won't like their child if he's a Black boy, and that they're spending an inordinate amount of time at the school fighting the school. And so they come in with their dukes up. So there's an inherent an earned lack of trust that our community has towards even our schools, because they look and they're like, "Are you just like one of them?" Because generation after generation after generation has been done wrong by what we refer to as schools. Continue down that road. So then when brothers do come into the classroom, the nurse's office, which is, I've never seen a Black male nurse in any schools that I've ever been affiliated with ever. Social workers, and on and on and on. We don't get to just do the job that we're hired to do. If you're a Black man who's teaching English, you don't get to just be the Black man teaching English. And I don't care if you're at a college, if you're an African-American man on an educational campus, you have to be, in many cases, more than you could even truly be. So the burden is so significant because, in large part, many of our young men do not have enough men who are Black around them to recognize that we're men and we just feel differently. We respond to certain circumstances differently. So what ends up happening is the role and response to life that many young men have is narrowed so much that they think that the only emotion that they can have is rage. And the only way that they can show that is to be violent. And so because there are so few Black men in the ecosystem that our young boys can connect to, and because our parents come in not trusting us, and rightly so, even those of us who are in the system do so as usually the one who's fighting the distrust of mom and the limiting of the emotional language of the boy. And
very quickly, Dr. Perry, how did you How do you break that down? If you see parents coming into your school and they have their dukes up, they got their blinders on, they got their walls up, how do you start to break that down?
It depends, to be completely frank with you. Sometimes they're in too hot, so that's not easy. But when they do come, beginning to say, sis, I hear you, mom, I get it. Try to show humility, try to show respect, hear them out, let them say what it is that they need to say, let them be heard. Once they start to repeat themselves, once they start to use cuss words and threats, then you got to stop the conversation.
Right.
But until they get to that point, let them, as the phrase goes, punch themselves out. Let them say what it is they need to say, because they're afraid. If you are the mother of a son, if you are the father of a son, if you're the father of a black son, a mother of a black son, and you're not afraid, something's wrong with you. You should be afraid, like for real. You should have genuine fear of how badly this can go, because it typically does.
Yeah.
So we got to try and find ways to work with them, hear them out. But another thing that we do is, the majority of our faculty are African American and Latin, period. And the majority of them are male. We work hard to make sure that when they come into the building, they're not going to just see one brother who's a security officer. No disrespect to the brother who's a security officer at whatever school it is, but that's not all we do. We have other stuff that we do too. So we have enough men who are black in particular, but black and Latin in general, who can honestly sometimes play good guy, bad guy, where it's like, all right, mom, I understand you're mad at him, but can I just holler at you for a second? Like, can we just talk this through?
Mm-hmm.
There it is. Look, we got to take a quick pause. When we come forward, more conversation with my distinguished panel as we talk about Black men in education. Stay with us. This is day 3 of the Culture's Black Men Summit, where we're redefining and celebrating Black manhood right here on the Black Star Network. Your comments coming up next. Stay with us.
Pull up a chair, take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
I'm Faraji Muhammad, live from LA. And this is The Culture. The Culture is a two-way conversation. You and me. We talk about the stories, politics, the good, the bad, and the downright ugly. So join our community every day at 3 p.m. Eastern and let your voice be heard. Hey, we're all in this together. So let's talk about it and see what kind of trouble we can get into. It's The Culture. Weekdays at 3, only on the Black Star Network. Folks, welcome back to the Culture's Black Men Summit, where we're redefining and celebrating Black manhood. Today, we're talking about Black men in education, and I'm joined by an esteemed group of Black men who are doing their part to change the dynamic and the conversation and the culture in schools. Joining me is Dr. David Miller, who is an educator and author and founder and creator of the Dare to Be King curriculum. He's joining us today. Also joining us is Dr. Steve Perry, who is another educator and author and founder of the Capital Prep Schools. And also joining us is my brother Anthony Pena, who is an educator, administrator, as well as an advocate for Black students. The jewels that you dropped earlier, Dr. Perry, is something that I want us to kind of hold on to, right? Just the simple fact of understanding the cultural dynamics. And Brother David, it made me think of, we're going through so much as it is on other fronts. And I'm saying as Black folks, as Black America, we shouldn't have to fight to just get a simple education, man. This is getting ridiculous. I'm thinking about the story, and we've talked about it here on the show. The little brother down in Texas who got suspended because of his hair. and he's 18 years old. They suspended his little brother because of quote unquote his conduct, his violation of the hair policy. They not only suspended him for 30 days, but they also have decided to put him into an alternative school for a few weeks as another punishment. And I mean, I'm thinking to myself, Brother David, this is 2023. His mother has filed a lawsuit against the state of Texas. But it's like, this is, I mean, at 18 years old, you're going through all of this drama because of your hair. I mean, he got the locks and, beautiful hairstyle. But it's just adding to, like, we're getting to a place, I would think, that we, like Dr. Perry said, man, look, I'm about to start my own thing. Or we're going to take our people out, take our children out. What's the resolution for a climate like this?
I mean, I think, and that's just the incident that you referenced is just one of so many. It would take an entire show to talk about all of the cultural collisions that occur in classrooms and in schools, particularly with Black males, teachers, and administrators. But for Raji and for those that are listening, we're in the fight of our lives, man, when it comes down to how we educate and socialize our children, particularly Black males. And it's going to take courageous efforts like Dr. Perry's and some of the work that other Black men and women have done who have courageously created their own schools. My son who just graduated with his MBA from FAMU, Florida A&M University, he was educated in independent African-centered schools, first in Baltimore and in DC. So we need to ramp all of that up. We need to operationalize community-based rites of passage programs in communities. I just think that the system is not going to change. We have to do a better job of educating and mobilizing those of us who, Du Bois would call the talented 10th, those in our community that have the knowledge and insight to not only build and create our own schools, but also create these supplemental educational opportunities, whether it's, summer STEM academies, whether it's, you look at the Genius Academy in Oakland, where they're doing a lot of STEM work. And so I just think that, we got to get organized and do a better job of locking arms. We got to be able to fund our own freedom. A lot of this, we're going to end up having to pay for out of our own pocket because the very systems that public dollars are going to educate, particularly Black boys, are failing. So again, we're in the fight of our lives, man. And if we're going to win, it's really going to take a more systematic and organized approach to identify what are the blind spots, what are the areas that we need to work on. And some of it is how do we mobilize grassroots organizations to do some of this heavy lifting. You look at freedom schools, have a strong history across the country. All of those things and more are what we're going to need to ensure our children receive a world-class education.
Dr. Perry and Brother Anthony, if we're in the fight of our lives, right, and I truly believe, Brother David, on this one, that we are in the fight of our lives, but it seems like we're still confused as to which side we should be on and whose side should we be on, right? Like when we have these larger systemic institutional conversations, you have a sector of our people that may say, we just need to reform the system. Then you have a sector of our people that say, we need to destroy the system. And then you have a sector of our people that says, well, we can do both. And I'm wondering, is it really that clear cut, especially when you're talking about educating the future of our people?
We absolutely cannot reform the system. It can't be reformed. It is what it is. There are too many people who earn their livings by maintaining the system. We are often told that the reason why urban schools fail almost absolutely is because they don't have enough resources. That's just not true. It's fundamentally not true. Because if we were looking at the issue of resources as the determinant of whether or not a school would be successful, then we should send all of our kids to prison because that's where we spend the most amount of money per pupil. So it's clearly not about money. We wouldn't be having this conversation on MSNBC, ABC, CBS, CNN because they don't value our voices, but Black Star does. In the same way that Black-owned media needs to be in order for our stories to be told, Black-led and founded schools need to be the route out. We have to stop expecting that DeSantis is going to allow us to teach about African Americans in his schools. We have to stop being shocked by somebody saying something about our kids' hair in their schools. We have to stop being surprised that we have to go down to that school and get at them for coming after our son, our uncle, our father, our grandfather, our brother. How many more times do they have to show us who they are? How many more times? In the areas where we've been allowed to be successful, and I said it the way I meant it, playing sports, we've been successful. Doing music, we've been successful. I'll give you a really quick story, really quick story. So we're looking to open a new school in Connecticut, actually in my hometown. We got the number one, we had the highest score for anyone who applied for a school. We had what the state referred to as historic turnout. Never before had the numbers been so high. At 11:48 p.m., just 12 minutes more, 12 minutes before the budget was passed for the state, two white legislators pulled our school out of the budget. Pulled it out. Man named Matt Lesser pulled our money out of the budget and didn't give it to anyone else. Just took it from us because they didn't want Black leaders to start a school in a community where the achievement gap is 67% of white kids can read at grade level, 26% of Black kids can read at grade level. We're going to keep asking.
That's crazy.
Put us on. So we're going to keep asking them, will you please stop being racist? No, I'm not asking anymore. I'm good.
Wow. That is crazy. That is absolutely insane. All right, let me get some comments from our online culture crew. Folks are checking in and they are listening loud and clear. Sharon Brooks, you checked in. You said, so grateful for schools like KIPP and other schools like Dr. Perry. They are doing a great service here in the Northeast. 6 days a week school program is an excellent asset for some communities. Sharon Brooks, thank you so much for checking in. And that's a nod to you, Dr. Perry, about the work that you're doing. Janelle, you checked in. You said educators, responding to our sister Lana, you said educators should be in charge of how curriculums are chosen, not commercial vendors. That's how we lost phonics in schools. Some random person with no evidence-based knowledge sold it to the state. I want to bring you into this part of this, Brother Anthony, because you are an administrator. You've been in those meetings. You've been at the table. You've been in the room where curriculums are determined. How is that process? How is that process determined? And to Janelle's point, talking about, commercial vendors, people who seem to capitalize off of school and, more importantly, capitalize off of the sharing of knowledge. Give us some insight into that space, bro.
Absolutely. And so I'm gonna speak broadly, but in general, school boards approve vendors, right? And so whoever has the biggest voice and gets the most money, then that's what gets allocated. And so they're right. Teachers do not have say in curriculum writing. There used to be a role of curriculum writers that were actually department heads, and now those roles have been removed in many districts across the country. So we don't have that avenue anymore. So what happens is that the superintendent, or what they call CEO now, or the chief academic officer who does all the academic supervision, they decide what the curriculum is, and then they feed it down to the principal, who they have to feed it to the teachers, and then the kids have to eat something that they're allergic to, which is BS, right? And so we have a system that is not designed for our people. So whoever has the most money, when it comes to testing, about Pearson and others, all those people have big money. And not only are they big money in school boards, they have big money lobbies in Congress. Right. And so there's a reason why programs across the country go to Congress and lobby, because they funnel into school boards. And that is why a lot of things die or live in the school board meetings, particularly those who are appointed or elected. They have a lot of power and pull. And so therefore you're not going to find curriculum that besets our young people that need it, because there's money. There's money in failure, as Dr. Perry alluded to earlier, and there's definitely money in education. There are a lot of companies that profit off of Black children. They profit at NCAA sports in college. Now they profit off of Black dollars because they provide a curriculum where young people cannot understand or digest it correctly. So therefore, it leads to a test metric system, which is Pearson, who then determines, let's test young people on something that's culturally irrelevant, knowing they're not going to pass because we have bias in our tests. And therefore, there's an intervention program by this program. It's a cycle that continues to go on and on where everybody's connected to failure.
And let me ask you this question, Brother Anthony. When we have a lot of our people, and I've talked to Brother David about this and others in the educational space, but I know that by me, like my experience of working in schools, I've often heard people who want to come into the schools offer some type of programming for the students, whether it's for a small portion of the students or for the whole school, and they got to go through a larger process. Is that something that needs to be encouraged? And is that something that you would advocate for us to do at this point, to at least change up the curriculum in the schools, or is that something that we should not be doing and really it's just a waste of time? Like where should we go with that?
I think it's two things, right? Yes, I think that, talk to your principal, local community, and definitely advocate for a curriculum, because sometimes principals might have money in their budgets to just get a program, intervention program or a reading program that's appropriate, right? Now, if you want a bigger scale impact, we got to spend our money in lobbying as well. We have to counter what it is with our own money, and that might have to be, we have to sacrifice a lot of us to bring money up to get a counterbalance of what's out there. So yes, I would say we both get in the schools, advocate your curriculum like Dare to Be King with Dr. Miller and others like those, but also start uniting pull our resources together and create our own school board, create our own system that can advocate for our own curriculum.
Can you do that? And I don't know. Can we do that? Can Brother David, Dr. Perry, can we go into some of these school districts and say, look, we are the Black Parents Committee?
So you know what's interesting? There's a book called The Strike That Changed New York. It's about the 1968 teachers strike, where they shut down the school system 2 times in 1 year because the Black parents in Ocean Hill, Brownsville wanted to do exactly what you're talking about. The same things that we're talking about have been done for generations. We've been lurching, trying to get our kids out of the system. And when we couldn't get them out of the system, we tried to create our own exit routes. And then they locked the doors and wouldn't let us out. So can we? Yes, you could run for your local board of education and you could create that in your local board of education. The public is you, it's us. But here's something to consider. One of the problems that we have right now is that we have too many people who don't realize that you can get the best curriculum in the world, but you got to have the people teach it. So let's use Connecticut, for instance, as a state. 4% of the teachers in the state of Connecticut are African American. 4% of the teachers in the state are African American. Yet the state passed a law that says you have to teach African American history. Who the hell's going to teach it?
Right. Come on.
So who's going to teach it?
Come on. I mean, that's the question right there. Look, I got to take another quick pause, brothers. When we come forward, let's talk about what programs and what folks are doing around the country to create a greater pipeline of bringing more Black men into the classroom, and share with you some of the programs that are doing the work on the ground, and more importantly, getting you connected. So stay with us. The conversation about Black men in education continues right here on the Culture's Black Men Summit, where we're redefining and celebrating Black manhood, right here on the Black Star Network.
When you talk about Blackness and what happens in Black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it. This is about covering us. Invest in black-owned media. Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks. We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible. Check some money orders. Go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland at RolandSMartin.com.
All right, folks, welcome back to the Culture's Black Men Summit, day 3 of our Black Men Summit, where we're talking about black men in education. And as you can hear from our esteemed panelists, folks, of Dr. Steve Perry, Dr. David Miller, and Brother Anthony Pena, you can hear that this is not just about black men in the educational space, but this is about all of us, that black men can lead the way, but there is greater opportunity for all of us to be involved in every aspect of our child's development, especially in the school space. I want to kind of get back to some of the questions here, because folks are checking in, and my sister Suzette brought this piece up, and I want to get your take on this from all of you brothers around this idea of school choice, the school choice movement. First, Brother David, what's your take on the school choice movement? She said, for my sister Suzette speaks, she said, for majority of the black community want to see positive student achievement. Should we support the school choice movement, focus on creating our own charter, private schools, hold public schools accountable? What's your take on that, Brother David?
I mean, I think oftentimes the challenge is, what are the choices that are available? And I just think that we have to come, as you know, Dr. Perry alluded to earlier, we got to get out of this posture of we still are begging and asking when we should be demanding and executing. And there are a host of schools and efforts like some of the Freedom Schools. You look at like the Eagle Academy schools that David Banks, who's now the chancellor of New York City Public Schools, created, where they have an all-male academy in every borough in New York City and one in Newark, and are doing amazing things. And you have Dr. Steve Perry in Connecticut and a bunch of other folks who are creating these kinds of schools across the country. So, you know, for me, the issue is, I mean, we can keep trying to do this song and dance, but the system is not going to change. The system is not going to radically start hiring more black male teachers. And as someone alluded to earlier, I used to be a black male teacher in the Baltimore City Public Schools. I was a social studies teacher, but they not only was I teaching social studies, sometimes they would be asking me to move boxes or go out walk some teachers to the parking lot, or stand at the front door. And so I was security guard, a pastor. They had me doing everything because I was one of only a few black male teachers in the building. I just think as a community, we got to come to the realization that we're trying to fit a square in a circle. It's not working, and it's not going to work.
We have to fight for school choice. It is the only way. Without school choice, you and I are not having this conversation. I'm at our school in Harlem. 5 blocks down to the right is Jeff Canada's school. There's no him and me if we don't get to create our own schools. There are not 400 kids in this building if we don't get to create our own schools. If we don't do this, this is our right. This is our right to make the determination as to how it is that our children are educated. I just don't think that our community fully has had the opportunity to get what it is that we have coming. Our kids are as smart as anybody else's, and are smarter than a few. If they're able to eke out the education that they are in the circumstances where they're being the most disciplined, most suspended, most expelled, least likely to take college preparatory classes if they make it to high school, and still they're able to be successful in any way, then imagine what could happen when we put them in academic experiences where people believe in them. So we have to fight for our own schools. We have to. What else is there? It's like when you go to a banquet and you go and it's a particular establishment and it's like the food is terrible here. What did y'all think was gonna happen? You thought you were gonna cook like your grandmother did? Wow. You knew the chicken was gonna be dry. You knew you were gonna have to have your girl take a hot. Like you knew that's what was gonna happen here. So here's the solution. Don't go there. Open your own. Open your own. Why do we always have to beg people? We look silly. It looks old. I mean, it's old to me. I'd rather have a couple small schools than to send my kids to schools where I know they're going to get dogged. I know they're going to get dogged. I know it.
Is that though, Dr. Perry? Is that like cultural laziness for us to, or are we tired? You know what I'm saying? When some people blame it on the parents. One of our crew members, Real Brooklyn, he said it's typical. He said this. Doesn't matter what school, the curriculum will only be effective if parents are willing to be involved in their kids' lives. You can't put a value on parenting because it's priceless. So if we're not moving into that space,
it's not that easy. Yeah. Again, as somebody who's had to get in between parents who do and say some really wild things, and do some wild things, I'm not going to cast aspersions on parents as a group, because if you're a parent, one thing you know is being a parent is hard as hell. And it is as humbling an experience as you will ever endeavor into. So I'm not going to do that because I'm a father. So I still, as a father, you can as an educator. But I will say this. What we do have to do is we do have to encourage our parents to participate in a meaningful way. But Dr. King made it clear in his final book, Where Do We Go From Here? Community of Chaos, when he said that a school should be so good that you should not be able to tell who that child's parents are.
Woo. Woo. I love that, Brother Anthony. I love that. What's your take on school choice, bro? Oh, Brother David, you got something you want to add to that?
Really quick before you jump over to Brother Anthony. You know, the conversation is always interesting because white folks are starting their own schools in communities that they gentrify every day. They will gentrify a neighborhood, and then instead of sending their children to private school, they will apply for a charter or open up an independent school all over the country. When white folks do it, it's their right, but when we do it, we're being subversive or something is wrong with us.
Absolutely. Brother Anthony, what's your take very quickly, bro?
I mean, the two brothers are right. I mean, the thing about school choice came out of after we had integration of Black students into schools. White parents went up there and pulled their kids out of school and started their own schools. So, because they didn't want to deal with what was going on of integration. So why can we not have our own schools as well? Let's educate our own people, give them the support they need so they can be more successful. So I'm all for school choice and make sure we get the money we deserve to support our young people, because the system is falling apart. It's only a matter, Minister Farrakhan talks about in the fall of America that the Americas are headed towards a disaster. We see that in foreign policy wise. We see that in education now. Look at our reading levels in math. We're not top 10 in the country and around the world. So what do you expect is going to happen in our schools? It's like going to McDonald's every day and saying, I have diarrhea every day. Are you going to keep eating at McDonald's, or are you going to just try to do something else, right? So at this point, we see that we're getting sick from the school systems in America. Let's get our own, fund it, and let's support it. I'm asking about, LeBron James, what he's doing there. Yes, there's some issues with some academic things, but those are deeper conversations around that. But do what you have to do to educate and protect our young people, because the future is dim right now if we don't get in right now.